Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'm a 22-year-old woman who's part of a pretty big friend group. We're all in our early 20s and usually get along great, meeting up a few times each month for dinner, movies, or just hanging out. Everything was fine until the whole vacation drama started. It all began when we tried organizing a group trip a few years back. With 10 people, finding a date that worked for everyone was impossible, so 7 of us ended up going. No big deal, right? The 3 who couldn't make it were super chill about it and just wished us a good time. The actual problem wasn't the size of the group, it was this couple I'll call Karen and her boyfriend. They hosted us at his family's vacation home, and oh boy, did they take that role seriously. From the moment we arrived, they acted like dictators on a power trip. They would bark orders at us every morning, insisting everyone had to be ready by 8 sharp because they had planned out every minute of our day. When I mentioned wanting to sleep in and explore the town at my own pace, they shut me down immediately, saying that wouldn't work with their carefully planned schedule. They controlled everything: where we ate, what we did, how we spent our money. It got really uncomfortable when they made dinner one night. I quietly grabbed something else to eat because I wasn't in the mood for chicken, but Karen noticed and made a huge scene. She accused me of being rude and dramatically claimed she might cry because I hadn't eaten her food. The final straw came when I had to leave 2 days early for an unexpected internship opportunity. They both attacked me for this decision, calling me stupid and saying I should have known to plan around the vacation. When I tried to explain that the internship was unexpected and necessary for school, they accused me of ruining everyone's time by leaving early. The funny thing is, when I had previously taken some friends to my family's vacation home, I let everyone do whatever they wanted. No schedules, no forced activities, no guilt-tripping about food choices, just a relaxed time with friends. Things got worse after that trip. They started tracking our locations and would call us demanding explanations if they saw we were hanging out without them. It was getting creepy. Last year I planned a small trip and could only take 4 people. The first 4 who responded got to come. Simple, right? Not for Karen and her boyfriend. They threw a massive fit about being excluded, arguing that because they had hosted us before, we owed them an invitation. When I suggested they could book an Airbnb nearby, they demanded everyone split the cost with them. We tried working it out, but their constant delays in booking ended up costing each of us 200 euros. When we finally gave up on including them, they had another meltdown and tried to establish a rule that if 3 or more people go on vacation together, everyone has to be invited. Their rule was ridiculous, but things really exploded this summer. My grandmother surprised me for my 21st birthday by booking hotel rooms for me and my 4 closest friends in the group. It was an amazing gift, but I knew telling Karen and her boyfriend would be a nightmare. After postponing the inevitable for 2 months, I finally broke the news as gently as I could. Karen initially pretended to be fine with it, but then sent an angry text saying how upset they actually were. They berated us for not trying to include them, and when I explained it was a birthday gift from my grandmother, they insisted I should have asked her to book rooms for them too. They've now completely cut us off, telling everyone who listened that we're the worst friends ever and that we need to learn how to treat people properly. The other 3 friends who weren't included in any of these trips are still totally fine with everything. They understand that not every trip needs to include the entire group. The entitled couple sent one final group message before blocking us all, declaring our behavior unacceptable and demanding that we shouldn't contact them unless we were ready to apologize and change our ways. You know what? We didn't bother. Our friend group is much more relaxed now, and we can plan trips without walking on eggshells. My house is currently uninhabitable thanks to my neighbor who thought he was untouchable. Let me give you some context about this whole mess. I'm a 35-year-old contractor who bought this house 5 years ago in what used to be a peaceful neighborhood. The previous owners sold it at a surprisingly low price, and I soon found out why. This guy living across the street was making everyone's life miserable. He's some rich trust fund kid who inherited his grandparents' house, never worked a day in his life, always bragging about his connections with local politicians and how his uncle is some hotshot lawyer. Since day one, he made it clear that he considered himself above everyone else in the neighborhood. At first, it was just small things. He'd park his sports cars, taking up 2 or 3 spaces on the street, throw loud parties until 4 a.m., and let his dogs do their business on everyone's lawns without cleaning up. Whenever someone complained, he'd wave around his uncle's business card and remind us how powerless we were against him. The homeowners association tried to fine him multiple times, but his uncle always got him out of it. The police were called countless times for noise complaints, but nothing ever stuck. He'd just get a warning, and the next weekend would be even louder. Last month, things started getting worse. He began purposely antagonizing people. Our last interaction before the incident was about his car blocking my driveway. When I politely asked him to move it, he smugly told me he could park wherever he wanted because this was his neighborhood. When I explained that I needed to get to work, he mockingly suggested I should walk or move out if I didn't like how things worked around here. When I threatened to call a tow truck, he tried intimidating me by saying he'd have my contractor's license revoked faster than I could imagine. I called the tow truck anyway. That was the first time anyone had successfully stood up to him, and he was furious. The tow truck driver even gave me a high five after loading up the car. For the next few days, he kept glaring at me from his porch. I installed security cameras just in case. Then yesterday happened. I was in my home office when I heard an engine revving unusually loud. Looking out my window, I saw him climbing into the driver's seat of a delivery truck. The actual delivery driver was running toward him, desperately shouting for him to get out of the truck. In response, he yelled back that he was going to show everyone what happens when people don't respect him in his neighborhood. Before anyone could react, he floored it. The truck plowed straight through my front room. If I hadn't been in my home office at the back of the house, I might not be here to tell this story. The crash was so loud that every neighbor came running out. He backed the truck out of my house, jumped out and ran to his car. As he fled, he was screaming about how he told us he could do whatever he wanted and that nobody could touch him. Several neighbors recorded everything on their phones. One of my security cameras caught the whole thing too, including a perfect shot of his face as he ran to his car. The police arrived within minutes, but he was already gone. They found his car abandoned at a bus station 20 miles away. His uncle is refusing to cooperate with the investigation, claiming he has no idea where his nephew is. The good news? His uncle's law firm dropped him as a client. Turns out they don't want to be associated with someone who commits grand theft auto and uses a truck as a weapon. The local politicians he bragged about knowing are also publicly denouncing him. The insurance companies are going after him for the truck in my house. The delivery company is pressing charges. I'm pressing charges. The police have issued warrants for multiple felonies. His face is all over the local news. Remember all those noise complaints and homeowners association violations he got away with? The district attorney is using them to establish a pattern of behavior. They're building a case to show this wasn't just a random act of rage, but the culmination of years of escalating entitled behavior. Right now I'm staying at a hotel while contractors assess the damage to my house. The neighborhood started a fundraiser to help with expenses not covered by insurance, raising way more than I expected. Turns out a lot of people really wanted to help the guy who finally stood up to him. His house is just sitting there empty. Word is his family is trying to sell it. They're having trouble finding buyers though. Apparently, nobody wants to buy a house whose previous owner drove a truck into the neighbor's living room. The police think he's trying to flee the country, but with his face everywhere and his assets frozen, it's just a matter of time before they catch him. His uncle can't help him anymore, and all those connections he bragged about have abandoned him. I've learned the neighbors actually tried warning me when I bought the house, but I didn't take them seriously enough. I thought they were exaggerating about how bad he was. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine he'd go this far, just because someone dared to have his car towed for blocking a driveway. Now everyone who drives by slowly to look at the giant hole in my house gets to see the big banner I hung up. This is what entitled behavior looks like. Maybe a bit petty, but after what he did, I think I've earned the right to be a little petty. When my son entered his sophomore year of high school, math wasn't his strongest subject, but he managed to keep up with extra effort. That was until he got assigned to this one math teacher. The first red flag appeared during parent night. While other teachers were considerate of our tight schedule to visit multiple classrooms, this one had different plans. Even after the bell rang, signaling us to move to the next class, she kept talking about her revolutionary teaching methods and how she had mastered the art of mathematical education over her 20 years of teaching. My spouse and I exchanged worried looks as we sat there, forced to listen to her self-praise while knowing we were missing important information from other teachers. When some parents started to leave, she had the nerve to tell them that their children's success in mathematics would depend entirely on their attention to her methods, punctuating her statement with a condescending scoff and muttered criticism about parents who supposedly didn't take their children's education seriously. Within weeks, my son's grades started dropping. He'd come home frustrated, telling me he couldn't understand the way she explained things. When I asked what happened when he saw clarification in class, he explained that she would just repeat the same explanation word for word, getting increasingly irritated if students still didn't understand. He told me that whenever he asked her to explain differently, she would just get angry and tell him that if he couldn't learn it from her, he just couldn't learn it at all. After seeing my son's confidence plummet, we decided to reach out to her. We left a message at the school office requesting a call to discuss our concerns. Days passed. No response. We left another message. Still nothing. That's when I decided to write her a letter. I detailed every instance of her dismissive behavior, her refusal to adapt her teaching methods, and her complete disregard for parent communication. The letter certainly got her attention. Within days, we were called into a conference with her and two school counselors. She stormed in, waving my letter like it was evidence in a murder trial. She immediately launched into a tirade about how the letter was absolutely unacceptable, claiming that in her 20 years of teaching, she had never received such a rude letter. I pointed out that if she had returned our calls, the letter wouldn't have been necessary. This only made her more angry, and she started ranting about being an experienced educator who didn't need parents telling her how to do her job. I responded by telling her that was exactly what she needed, since she was currently failing at it. The first counselor tried to keep the discussion constructive, but the teacher wouldn't have it. She went on about how she had helped hundreds of students excel in mathematics, suggesting that if my son couldn't keep up, perhaps he should consider moving to a lower-level class. I countered by suggesting that perhaps we should consider moving him to a teacher who actually teaches. The second counselor attempted to steer the conversation toward additional support options for my son, while I sat there maintaining my composure as the teacher continued ranting about her qualifications and experience. When she finally ran out of steam, I spoke explaining that we would hire a tutor for our son, and if he succeeded with a tutor, it would prove that the problem wasn't his ability to learn, but her ability to teach. The teacher's face turned red, but before she could respond, I told her that we would be requesting weekly progress reports from both her and the tutor to document everything. We hired a tutor that evening. Within 2 months, my son's grades improved dramatically. The tutor explained concepts clearly and adapted their teaching style to match my son's learning needs. By the end of the semester, my son had pulled his grade up to a B. The teacher couldn't stand it. Every time she saw me in the school hallway, she'd turn the other way. When my son moved on to his junior year, he got a different math teacher and maintained excellent grades throughout the year. That entitled teacher's perfect record of student success wasn't so perfect anymore. Several other parents followed our lead and hired tutors, all with similar results. She was asked to attend mandatory teaching methodology workshops over the summer. I've been working in the restaurant industry for about 5 years now, mostly in kitchens. My current gig is at this place right next to a music venue. It's pretty sweet actually. We get super busy during concert weekends, but during the off-season, it's mostly just our regulars keeping us company. We stay open late because of our bar service, and we also host music nights of our own. The owner's pretty cool too. He's one of those rare bosses who actually worked his way up from washing dishes, so he gets what it's like in the trenches. I'm one of those people who really can't stand being idle at work. If there's nothing to do, I'll find something to do. That's probably why the head chef likes having me around. I'm always looking for ways to improve or try new things. He's caught me experimenting with recipes during slow periods more times than I can count. But instead of getting mad, he usually tastes whatever I've made and gives me tips on how to make it better. So this one day in late fall, it was really quiet. After finishing the usual cleaning and inventory check, I noticed we had some apples that were about to go bad. Instead of letting them go to waste, I decided to work on perfecting my pie recipe. We didn't usually make pies at the restaurant, but hey, it was better than scrubbing baseboards for the 100th time. I spent a good hour getting the crust just right. My grandmother's secret was using both butter and shortening, and adding just a touch of vinegar to make it extra flaky. The pie turned out amazing, if I do say so myself. The head chef tried it and said it was one of the best he'd ever tasted, even took one home with him. That's high praise coming from someone who's been in the industry for 20 years. He even suggested we might add it to our dessert menu during the holiday season, which had me walking on air for the rest of my shift. By closing time, we'd cleaned everything, broken down our stations, dated all our prep, and stored everything in the walk-in refrigerator. I was just killing the last 10 minutes at the bar, waiting for my ride home and chatting with my bartender friend about the upcoming weekend's band lineup. That's when they walked in, bringing a gust of cold air and attitude with them. It was 10:55 p.m. when this couple strolled through the door, dressed like they'd just come from some fancy event, but acting like they owned the place. The woman's fur coat probably cost more than I made in 3 months, and the man's leather jacket looked expensive enough to pay my rent. The bartender told them we were closing soon, but the woman immediately demanded food, her voice dripping with entitlement. I stood up from my bar stool and explained that the kitchen was closed and all the line cooks had gone home, so we couldn't serve any food. The man in the leather jacket responded with a sneer, making a sarcastic comment about thinking this was a restaurant, while drumming his fingers impatiently on the bar top. Trying to be accommodating and help my bartender friend get a decent tip, I offered them some of my homemade apple pie for free. I even mentioned that the head chef had praised it, hoping to appeal to their apparently refined tastes. The woman in the fur coat rejected my offer with disgust, insisting they wanted real food as if I'd offered her something scraped off the bottom of her shoes. Her nose went so high in the air I thought she might strain her neck. That's when my bartender friend had enough. She told them they should have come before 10 p.m. if they wanted food, and announced that the bar was now closed, telling them to get out. I could see the familiar look in her eyes, the one every service worker gets when they finally reach their limit with entitled customers. When she started turning off lights, I took that as my cue to head to the kitchen and do the same. I was in the walk-in when I heard footsteps follow me into the dark kitchen, followed by the man's incredulous voice. He actually had the nerve to follow me into an employee-only area. My bartender friend had to tell him that he couldn't be in the kitchen and needed to leave through the front door. Her voice carrying that stern tone that experienced servers, perfect over years of dealing with difficult customers. I could hear her starting to print the end-of-night credit card reports while they finally stomped out, muttering about poor service and threatening to leave bad reviews. I poked my head out of the walk-in to turn off the parking lot lights, leaving them to navigate the dark parking lot in their fancy shoes. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Definitely. Later, while driving me home, my bartender friend filled me in on these two. Apparently, they'd only been to the restaurant a few times, but they'd made quite an impression. Never tipped, always argued about their bill with the owner, and once even tried to claim their steaks were undercooked after eating almost all of them. She told me she'd been waiting for a chance to kick them out, and when they refused free dessert just to try and force us to cook them food, an hour after kitchen close while being completely rude about it, well, that was the last straw. We never saw them again during my time there, though we did spot some hilariously dramatic reviews online the next day, full of obvious lies about how they'd been assaulted by the staff and forced out into dangerous darkness. The owner just laughed and filed them away with the other ridiculous complaints he'd collected over the years. My bartender friend and I celebrated by eating pie at her place and laughing about the whole thing. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.